Welcome everyone to this amazing study session for the Pima Community College Governing Board. We have two great topics that we will be discussing, and I'm looking forward to hearing from our subject matter experts at the college. And before we begin, those two topics are finance and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And before we begin, Chancellor Lambert, do you have anything you would like to kick off?
Yes, Chairwoman Ripley, it's my pleasure to introduce our first topic, the fiscal year 2023 budget discussion. And then I'll come back when this one is done and introduce the DEI discussion. First, I want to thank Dave, Dr. Dave B. and his team for putting all of this together. And I also want to thank each board member for meeting with us. I appreciate that each and every one of you took the time to have pre-meetings with us. That really helps in formulating the presentation you're going to be seeing here shortly. So with that, Dave, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Ripley, members of the board, Chancellor Lambert, colleagues and guests. As Lee just mentioned, this is an opportunity for us to continue the conversation that we started in the late fall about the lead into the fiscal year 23 budget. So what we're going to be tackling today, and really we want to have this be, I'll provide some information, but really give the board an opportunity to have some interactive discussion related to the expenditure priorities that we've been discussing. I'm going to have some updated information on revenue and the projections of that, some conversation about the future and how to plan for our new enrollment reality. So that's going to be part of the information that we're going to talk about today, with the ultimate goal that, one, we have a proposal related to tuition that we can take to the board at the meeting in March. And that then more comprehensively, the total budget for presentation to the community that we'll be showing to the board at the May meeting. At that point, we'll also be talking about sort of developing this 3-year plan. So this will be the first of the 3 years. And we're going to talk a little bit about what we're looking to do with that. And we welcome and encourage the board to give us some feedback if they'd like to see anything different from sort of how we're planning and how it's coming together. So with that, let's go ahead and start a little bit with what our expenditure priorities are. So first and foremost, as we've been discussing with the board, and again, to reinforce what Chancellor Lambert just mentioned, thank you. Being able to discuss class comp with the individual board members and sort of get into a little more detail about how important that work is and how important it is for our employees. It was a welcome discussion and clearly is the biggest priority of the budget this coming year. It's been challenging going through a number of years of budget reductions, starting with state budget reductions that happened during the fiscal crisis, and then the challenges related to expenditure limitation, and then with enrollment decline. So we've been going through sort of a myriad of challenges from a financial standpoint over the last 10 years. The passage of Proposition 481 and Proposition 207, which adds some additional revenues coming into the college, gives us some flexibility to, I think, go back and now make some significant improvements to our compensation for our employees. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail about that as we go through today. The second priority that we want to do is there are a number of initiatives that the federal funding enabled us to kick off and that we want to continue. Primarily this is related to the laptops, hotspots, enabling students from more disadvantaged backgrounds to have the technology so that they would be successful. What we're talking about is potentially something along the lines of a $2 tuition increase, which will enable us to continue that program, continue to have online proctoring services for the growth in our online programs. But again, first and foremost, enabling us to continue what we've done in terms of having laptops, having tablets, and hotspots available for students and then having some staff available to help with that program. So those are really, the board at the previous study session had talked about any tuition increase should be tied directly to student benefit. We, I think, have worked a good program together where the $2 tuition increase that we're going to be talking about is specifically tied to benefits that those students would be getting through those programs. And the federal funding will be going away, so this would enable us to continue that going. We'll be talking later in the spring more in detail about giving you an update on where we're at with the revenue bond projects and with some of our other capital projects, along with the proposal for the capital budget. We're not going to talk too much about that today because that's mostly funded out of college reserves and what is already operationalized within the budget. But just to put that as a reminder, it's something that we will be talking about as we go forward with the budget development. And later during this session, we're going to talk about reallocating resources, and really one of the key elements of what we're trying to do is, as the college transitions to new ways of doing education, that we need to shift resources in different ways throughout the college. May think about how to provide services in a different way without just everything being additive, because we're not in a situation with our enrollment being where it's at. We're not in a situation where we should be adding additional costs for what we really need to do is figure out how to spend our money, the money we're currently getting, more wisely. In the upcoming March session, we're going to be talking about what we've done for 2 years now is the student success courses at no charge. We have really good information that that's a very successful initiative. What we're going to be looking to do is actually make a proposal that we just continue that on an ongoing basis rather than renewing it each year, which is what we've done the last 2 years. So we sort of started it as a pilot, see how it goes. The second year, we renewed it again, but the idea now would be, so that we don't have to keep going back every year, that the idea is the college will be providing these student support courses at no charge to students, that it leads clearly to student success, and we'll be talking with the board in the March board meeting about that. And then lastly, the other two initiatives, and as we're able within the budget, is to continue to increase student scholarships and the funding to help enable students to come to the college, and then enhancing marketing in this increasingly competitive arena. So the priority order for these things is really focused on class comp, and then as we're able with the resources and with the way the budget comes together, we'll be working towards some of those latter initiatives, but really it's focusing on class and compensation. To give an overarching perspective, again, to a $1 tuition increase represents an additional $350,000 of revenue for the college. So when I mentioned the $2 tuition increase idea for the laptops and to continue that program, that would generate about $700,000, and that offsets the costs of continuing that program on an annual basis, both in terms of the equipment and in a little bit of staff support that is involved in getting the machines up and ready, and then lending them out and tracking them with students. Property taxes, and we talked with the board about the fact that we assume, and I'm going to have more details, so I'm not going to get into the details, but the idea is to talk about a range or different options related to property tax, because we have not done the levy max the last couple of years. We have the capacity still to grow all the way to increase to the levy max, which would entail an increase of 6% to taxes, and I'll show you where that is, and that we're going to recommend doing that and phasing that over time, and that came about from a conversation with the board in the fall. But I'll walk you through some of the details. We also have some good news related to state budget. The governor's budget has some additional allocations for STEM, continuing what they did last year. We think that that will happen in the legislative budget, and then a conversation related to 207 money. So I'll give you some of the information related to what the increased revenues look like from that standpoint. But the revenue picture from those key revenue sources, we have flexibility and we have some potential revenue growth there. In terms of what does tuition look like right now, so currently we're at $87 for in-state tuition. We're at We're in with the majority, we're in the same realm of other peer institutions, the other community colleges. We're slightly on the higher end, but it's sort of like Coconino is high, and then the next 6 institutions are really clustered within a couple or a few dollars of tuition per credit hour. This shows what the impact would be for a $1, $2, $3 credit hour impact in terms of the in-state rate, what it would mean for non-resident students as well, and what the online and the differential tuition, what that looks like. And again, what we're talking about with the tuition increase and the proposal that we want to take to March would be something in the neighborhood of a $2 increase. And again, that would be to support the ongoing effort with the laptop initiative and so forth, what was federally funded, and some student proctoring. Okay, in the property taxes, this a little bit of a busy spreadsheet, but basically, if you look at where we're at in fiscal year 22, our tax levy right now, our current year tax levy is $123 million and change. Levy neutral for next year, that means we don't increase the taxes. That's just adding growth from new property that comes onto the tax rolls. That's going to generate another $2 million. And then if we shoot all the way to the far right, this is what our levy max capacity is. So we're able to levy all the way up to $133 million. We can spend the money because Prop 481 passed. What that means is that if we went all the way to that tax levy and increased it all the way to the $133 million, that would be a 6% increase to the taxpayers. And then you can see what the tax rate change would be. And I see that, Damien, you have a question.
Dave, thank you very much. I really appreciate the graph. Could you just tell us what don't have the 4%. I mean, if we did 4% this year, we would be doing it then 4% next year. So it would be sort of 2 year over year, same amounts versus this 3-year thing, which would sort of push us out 3% a year for 3 years. I mean, this is the problem with not increasing it to keep pace with inflation, right? And now we see with sort of the more significant inflation that's occurring, we're not even this year, we wouldn't even be able to keep pace with that, even if we were to increase probably the 6%, certainly not over the last accumulation of inflation over the last 3 years. So could you just provide a little bit of insight into what that would look like if we did it this year and then another 4% next year, what your thoughts are?
So just to clarify a little bit. So to go to max would be a 6% increase to the taxes. That's the accumulation of 2 years. It isn't 2 plus 2 and it's been cumulative. It's a 6% now from where we're at to where we would be. So doing a 3% is halfway to the max. And that's what, so we were sort of, what it would mean is it's phasing it in over 2 years, getting to the levy max in 2 years.
But sorry to interrupt, Dave, but then next year we'd be at 5% because we still wouldn't be, because we're adding another 2% to the 3% that we haven't done. So, that's.
Yes. Yeah.
So really we're looking at like
well, it would be probably more like a 3% and a 4%, I think, because there's a compounding effect that's happening here. But yeah, so it wouldn't be quite as big a jump in the next year because there's growth in new property and some other things that would have an effect on it. But yes, what we would be doing is deliberately leaving some money on the table or off the table, whatever the right phrase is. And that at a time when we're talking about, we are absorbing some pretty significant inflation. And again, where we're talking about trying to do the best we can for compensation and for our employees, they're all feeling the effects of inflation. So next year, just to give some insight, next year's levy max will be probably $136 million. I know because of the compounding effect and how things change year over year, it's not a linear effect that you're describing, and I'm trying to make that clearer, but I'm not doing a great job of it.
But in terms of the accumulative percentage, I mean, if we do,
I think that
percent, right, we could do a total of 6% this year. If we do 3% this year, that leaves 3% for next year, plus the 2% that would naturally organically occur next year. So that takes us to 5%, right? So that doesn't really, or is it better to do 4 now, 4 then, 4 next year? so that is sort of the same year over year, as opposed to trying to, spread it out for multiple years, and other economic uncertainty. We don't know what's coming in the future, right? So if, there was a bad financial year and we didn't want to do the levy to its full capacity, it would just continue the compounding effect.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's something that's a worthwhile conversation with the board, that right now, just to give some context. So if you take a typical property, I think the average property right now, the assessment valuation for residential is around $150,000. But let's just use $200,000 just as a ballpark. The 3% increase that we're talking about here would be an increase, all things considered, an actual tax increase for a $200,000 property of about a little bit less than $8. It'd be $7.50. So because this increase gets spread out so much, it actually has a fairly small impact on individual properties. However, for the college, it makes a big difference. And so the question, I think, for the board to really think about is do we want to shoot for 3%, something less than 3%, or go a little bit higher, closer to the levy max, I think is a good question. And you can see where, if we go up to the levy max, you have another, so to do the 3% adds over the growth number. So growth is 2 million. So the 3% increase, it generates about 3.8 million. And then on top of that, if we went all the way to the levy max, it adds another almost 4 million. Chair Ripley?
Yes. Hi, Dr. B. Yeah, I think just adding to Board Member Klinko's comments, it would be good to see the 4%, because I think that the board and perhaps not the greater public sort of saw this coming, because we did try to consider and be considerate of the pandemic in not raising the tax levy. So I think that if we see all the numbers and if we shape this narrative to direct, all of us to all of the things that you just said, I think it would really help, because at some point, as Board Member Klinko suggested, we need to catch up, because it's just going to keep accumulating, and we're just going to always be in catch-up mode unless we do something. And I don't think 4% is that drastic when you look at it, and it might get us back, but we do need to see the numbers. And I think that would really help all of us make a better decision, maybe. Thanks.
Well, and so just to give a little bit of info, like I can kind of, I can't give you the exact number, but I'll give you roughly what the number is. So if a 3% increase is an increase for a $200,000 property of $7.50. So it's about $2.50 for every 1% increase that you're talking about. So again, it's a fairly small increase for a residential property. Again, with commercial, it gets to be more significant. But the other thing to consider is what the other taxing entities may do in town and what kind of an impact that may have. But again, for us, it actually would be fairly moderate and wouldn't be that noticeable for the typical residential property.
Okay, thank you.
Any other tax-related questions?
So Dr. B,
go ahead,
I would just say, I would support the 4%, just for the record.
Any other discussion with other board members? Ms. Garcia, you're muted.
I do not support any increase, primarily because I think that we could do well with the new homes that are coming on board.
Yes, Damien?
So, Dr. B, could you tell us, so if we were to do zero, the impact to the budget, if we did 0%, if we did zero, if we didn't increase the levy and we allowed it to continue to accumulate, that would create, could you tell us exactly how much of an impact that would be on the budget and really where we would see those cuts and what we would have to do? Because you've really built this around the expectation that there would be some increase based on our initial conversations. Am I right?
Right. Yeah. So there's going to be levy neutral generates an additional $2 million. So that's this figure right here. The Prop 207 money, I jump ahead here. So 207 is another 2.6 million. So we're talking about additional revenue about maybe $5 million if we go, well, this is the levy neutral scenario. So exclude tuition just for the sake of this conversation, because again, we're sort of thinking about tuition as supporting the federal initiatives and continuing that. But you're talking about $6 million of additional revenue coming to the college. What the challenge is that with the class comp priorities, having a significant amount of money so that we can adjust to this new class comp reality without coming out and having a class comp study say, okay, we're going to have this new structure. The market identified that we want to make these adjustments. And, oh, by the way, the college doesn't have sufficient budget to get you there. And we have to do cuts at the same time, or we would have to do some cuts at the same time. So what the idea is that because we have the revenue accessible, because the community supported 481 and we can actually access and spend that money, we can actually, I think, do a really good job adjusting and folding the class comp study and the results of the class comp study into the budget. Otherwise, there's some concerns about whether we can do all of that without having some other reductions go along with it. And
so just to reflect back to make sure I understand. So if we don't do this at a minimum of 3% with a potential increase to the credit tuition hour, we would struggle to implement the class comp study and increase pay to be competitive, and in fact would have to potentially make cuts into our employee base.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And Board Member Hay.
Thank you, Dr. B. I just wanted to fully support your process and your deliberative evaluation. I think the community has told us loud and clear that they support a strong community college, and the students expect our faculty and our staff to be compensated as well. And so I fully support certainly the 3% and maybe another 3% next year. But of course, the community is under inflation too, so I don't think we want to raise it too high. But I certainly am supportive of finding the revenues to support our faculty and staff. Thank you.
Okay, one of the critical things that we're talking about also that we want to sort of phase into is the idea of scenario planning and developing a 3-year plan going forward. And so, you know, this is not news to the board. We've talked at length about the challenges of where enrollment is now, the fact that where the college is in terms of its infrastructure, staffing size, that sort of thing related to where our enrollment currently is. And so what we're looking to do is really be realistic and be good stewards of public funds and sort of developing a longer range plan that addresses this change in enrollment. And if enrollment stays at this level, how are we going to right size the institution? So I wanted to talk a little bit about where we're at with that. The challenges that we have, there are additional revenue sources other than the ones that we just talked about. The 207 looks like it's going to continue to grow some amount. It's not clear how much it's going to grow past what we were just talking about. But we've had significant reductions in other revenues, particularly auxiliary revenues, as there's enrollment goes down and the viability of having the textbook contract being the structure it has been historically. Those are revenues, contract revenues down, and investment revenues are down. So we have lost revenues in other areas. And again, we're sort of shifting a reliance over to the tax side. That has a couple of implications long term. One, it's clear that the community supports that idea because they passed 481 to give us the ability and the flexibility to tap into what is our tax base. However, looking forward, if our enrollment doesn't grow, that in a number of years, we're going to be coming back and having more conversations about expenditure limitation again. Now, I will point out, it won't be the same exact conversation with expenditure limitation because we won't be talking about a cliff where there were new statutes passed that led to a dramatic reduction, a dramatic one-time reduction in expenditure limitation. It will be gradual. But what will happen is if our enrollment stays static, the only thing that grows from an expenditure limitation standpoint is you get a little bit of inflation money each year. And the college expenses will probably grow faster, and historically they've grown faster than the inflation measure that's in expenditure limitation. So there, at some point, you really have to make sure that you're calibrating the size of the institution and the size of the budget with the size of students, and it's good stewardship and it's good fiscal responsibility. So what we're looking to do is continue to develop mechanisms and actually reduce the size of the institution over time. So this would be mostly in fiscal year 24, 25, through technology, being more efficient with what we do, and then reallocating resources that we've talked about, shifting resources to provide services in a way that might be different or might be more efficient than how we currently do. And then thereby reducing some of the size of the staff going forward. Wanted to give you some information. This is enrollment information, how things have changed recently. The board has been through this a number of times. I don't really want to talk too much about it, but COVID has resulted in pretty dramatic reductions in enrollment after we already had sort of sustained reductions following the fiscal crisis. We sort of stabilized and then had a big drop off when the COVID pandemic occurred. And so the idea is we're now a size institution in terms of our enrollment that we were built up and staffed up for a size that's significantly bigger than where we're currently at. So what we want to do is gradually realign the college's resources to be aligned with the size of the student body, to continue to do that, because again, that's what we were doing when we reduced for expenditure limitation. So what we want to do is build a 3-year plan where we plan for that. Should enrollment not turn around, it will gradually reduce our overall size as well. So one of the ways that we look to do it, and we've shared with the board comparisons with peer institutions in terms of staff size. So we know we're a large institution compared to large in terms of staff per student compared to peer institutions. There are a couple of reasons for that. One is that what I just talked about, and another is that in different states, particularly when we look outside of the state, that other institutions have different structures. The state may provide information technology or human resources structures so that those wouldn't be on those colleges' iPads information, the college's data. However, we're on the high side, so we want to look at that and goes, okay, based on the measures that we've looked at with peer institutions, we know we're pretty high, not surprising. Then what we did is we looked at where has the college historically been in terms of the staff size per student. And what this shows is between 2012 and 2014, the average FTSE per staff, full-time staff, regular staff position was 20. From 2015 to 2019, that's following some of the work we did with expenditure limitation and to reduce our staff size. It dropped down to about 15 per staff. And then because of COVID and the big drop that we experienced, it's now about 12. So what we're looking to do is sort of build some scenarios, and this is where we want the board feedback is, do we want to build something that's more aggressive than this, or build scenarios that are along the lines of continuing the 50-to-1 ratio for faculty that's been in place for some time now, and then for the overarching staff number to target 15-to-1. And just to give you an idea of what that looks like, so it looks like right now that would be a reduction of about 150 positions. That would not be particularly easy to do. That's after having reductions already. We've added some positions back, but not that many. from the expenditure limitation reduction. So it would be a pretty significant reduction for the college to move in that direction. Again, to phase that in over the course of 3 years, or should we drop down and do something that might be more in the realm of 90? And those would be sort of the scenarios that we're talking about for May. Looking at one scenario is, okay, we're going to try and reduce by 150 over 3 years. Or something probably more realistic would be in the realm of 90. So that'd be about 30 positions a year to reduce. It's a lot easier to reduce through attrition if you're talking about a number that's in the realm of 30 than it would be if it's about 50. That's a lot harder to do. And the college also has to come up with, I think, and this is where I'd also welcome some board feedback about, well, so what would be the plan? How would we go about doing that? I think that would be something that the board could task us with, is come up with a plan. How would you reduce that number of positions over the next 3 years? And we can give that kind of feedback to you, how we can approach that. To give some context of what does that mean in the scope of the college, this is how positions are allocated roughly by location. It varies a little bit because it's a matrix organization now. And so now you have positions that are technically district positions that might be located at a campus, but this gives you rough size that 150 positions, somewhat analogous to closing down an entire campus in terms of position. Now, that's not what we're saying we would do. That's what the idea is that if we've been talking about this for some period of time now, the idea is having the 5 campuses in a couple of locations is not the structure that you would have with the size of our enrollment ordinarily. However, we have what we have, and it's important for us to be able to provide services to the community at the different locations. And I think that there are reasons why we might want to keep those locations. There are grants at those different locations, et cetera. What this is really saying is, okay, it would be the equivalent of about closing down a Northwest campus. Not that we're saying we would close down Northwest campus, just to be clear what I'm trying to say. What it would be then is we find cuts throughout the college, shift resources around, reallocate, provide different types of service, particularly at the smaller campuses, and utilize technology to provide better service so that we're continuing to provide good service, but we're able to reduce the amount of people we have on staff. Okay, so this gets us to, again, talking about yes, Mr. Kleinko.
Thank you, Dr. B. Well, again, thank you for the presenting, as always, sort of an unfiltered reality of where our situation is. I think it really helps the institution prepare, and certainly this board prepare for the coming realities if enrollment doesn't significantly shift. I know for me, I think it would be helpful to sort of see maybe 2 or 3 different model scenarios. I mean, I hate to call it like a Goldilocks model, but if we could look at what if we took a very conservative approach, if we took a sort of middle of the road approach, and then we took a much more aggressive approach, and really look at sort of how that plays out in terms of both our facilities and sort of the long range trajectory of our physical plan and staffing levels. Because as we've talked about over the years, we know that there has been redundancy in the system. We've done a lot in terms of implementation of changes and new modeling, especially around how we're delivering services to students to try to address some of that, as the old model of providing everything everywhere, and now moving to more of this hybrid online. And certainly the pandemic has significantly sped that up. So I think it would be helpful to really look at those various scenarios so that we could make a more informed decision, and we would really understand what the implication of that really was going to be. And I think that the board in the past has not been, as long as we have the real information of what we're looking at, we've been able to make strategic decisions that have really helped prepare us as an institution for significant changes economically, culturally, enrollment issues. So for me, that would be very, very helpful. And I would, ask that come back to the board with a more in-depth conversation around that.
I'd like to also add, thank you very much, Dr. B, for that. And it is a reality, it's a stark reality that we all have to face. We haven't recovered from the Great Recession. And as soon as 10 years went by, we got stripped of our state funding across Arizona, and then the pandemic hit. So all of this has come to a head. And I think the reality of resizing or right sizing is a really important, hard conversation that we all have to have. And I think holistically, I would like to see some scenarios and some proposals that, if for lack of a better word, looked at it holistically and looked at right sizing enrollment and the resources that we commit to increasing enrollment and increasing retention, as opposed to just looking at the worst case scenario, which is an increasing basically students fleeing higher education. So I think that if we looked at it holistically, that would really help give a little bit more of an optimistic view of the next 3 to 5 years. So we do need to continue this. Thank you.
So let me add to all of this. So Dave's talking about it from the fiscal standpoint. What we've been working on is developing where we think that puck is going. So developing that overarching strategy for how we want to position the college and then align the fiscal resources to that reality. So instead of looking at, a lot of places like to do this across the board type of reductions, I think our approach will be more strategic and really look at, again, where the opportunities lie. That's going to mean some restructuring of how we do internal business, which is not always a bad thing. It's just a reflection of the new reality, but in a way that it allows us to maximize and optimize what we have and try to keep as many people employed as feasible. I always start from, I don't want to lay anybody off. I want to look at how we can reallocate, leverage who we have, but we need to be open to that. So I'll give you an example so people just have a concrete sense of this. So we know that we're growing dual enrollment. That is so critical for us to be able to serve a greater number of high school students. We know our high school going rate is very low in the state of Arizona, but through dual enrollment, we can expand that high school going rate. One of the barriers to that expansion is faculty with the qualifications to teach college level courses. Unless Pima starts to deploy its own resources, that faculty in this case, into those environments, which would allow us to expand. Now, what that means is we may be getting more of those high school students getting college education, but they may get their associate's degree. Therefore, they don't need to come directly to us. And so is that a good thing, or is that a bad thing, or is that a neutral thing, right? And so that's part of what I mean by starting to think more strategically as opportunities for us. But it does change the equation. We do get FTE, by the way, for those dual enrollment students.
Board Member Garcia had a question.
Yeah, Pastor, going off on what you said about dual enrollment and reallocating the teachers, would you consider, or maybe you already have, since the schools don't have, like TUSD doesn't have enough teachers, there's shortage of teachers, is there some way that maybe perhaps you could try to negotiate positions with TUSD with our faculty?
Right. I think that that would be part of the dynamic. I think there's opportunities to explore that. Remember, our teachers are not certified to teach at the K-12 level. And so there's some realities around classroom management that we'd have to work through.
But we can do that.
But we can do that. That's right.
You're right.
But our faculty have to be willing to go down this path.
Right.
And they have to be willing to go down this path. But I think it could create a win-win for everybody if all sides are open to it. I mean, it's not it's not going to solve the larger challenges, but it's one piece of an overall solution.
And then the other part where we're talking about providing services the same at all campuses, I really do think that we need to relook at that. And my point is, with the centers of excellence being the main focus right now, okay, so we really need to look at that. Are we considering just having that as a main campus? Do we really need 5 buildings? Do we reallocate our resources? I mean, I just don't think that we've looked at everything as openly as we should.
So I always start, so let's step back for a moment, right? I mean, great question. So right now, because we're designated as campuses, that we receive quite a few federal grants as a result of that. So if we moved away from a campus model, 1 or 2 locations as an example, we would be walking away from those grants. We're talking millions. So we have to understand that as part of the larger consideration. So we want to do a piece around that for the board. So I want you to understand those considerations. Another thing is, if you look at our enrollment patterns currently, we are growing in some areas of the college. And it happens to be aligned with the centers of excellence. So we need to also weigh that into the mindset. Now, I'll pick on East Campus as an example. I'll pick on our public safety program. Right now, we know that we can grow that program and its enrollment if we expanded the physical footprint of it. But because of our limited current footprint, we can't expand enrollments there. There is demand for that program. We just don't have the physical capability to meet that. And so looking at it from those strategic lenses, there's opportunity for us. Now I'll dial it back out. And I mean, you've heard me say this many, many times. And just, again, this is all about the data. If you go and look at our zip codes, the classification of instructional programs at a national level, especially during the pandemic, the zip codes that have taken the largest reductions in enrollment in community colleges have been primarily in the liberal arts program areas and in the physical sciences. And if you look at over the decades where the enrollments have been declining, it's been in the liberal arts. So if you bring all of that together, that's a reality we're going to have to confront. But I believe if we modernize the liberal arts, bring more of the digital tools into the classroom, that may help to reverse some of that decline. In talking to some other universities who have done what I just described, their enrollments are going back up in their liberal arts side because they've digitized the liberal arts. And the faculty are essential to this. So it's not less faculty, it's faculty now approaching their work in a different way with digital tools. And so we're looking at all of those pieces, right? Because I believe that students have got to have that experience. And by the way, those are the pieces that transfer to the U of A, to ASU, NAU, and the like. So we got to figure out how we balance all of that out.
Okay. Well, I get what you're saying, Chancellor. But the other part, I guess, that maybe some people don't understand is that even when you do like the vocational training or skills training, normally when you get people into those jobs or in those areas, they then grow and want to do the liberal arts. They will aspire to learn something else. And, they'll go for business degrees or something else. But, I don't think that, you start that's where I think the centers of excellence is a good idea, but you can also grow that with the liberal arts.
And that's what we're hoping to do. But again, it's not the way we've been doing it. It's got to be recast, integrated. So, because the other data that we're learning, right, is the best experience for a learner is not one versus the other. It's the infusion of the two. So, let's not forget that. Now, what we're learning is the learners don't come to us necessarily wanting one piece. They want the skill piece, the technical skill piece. And they don't want to sit in the class for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. They want to come in and get it and then get to work or do it while they're working. But so if we can integrate this in a better way, then I think we have an opportunity to strengthen or bolster the liberal arts, as well as bolster our CTE side of the equation. But it's going to be a challenge. And so we're talking about this in the context of the metaphor of the second curve. The second curve represents the digital age. We're transitioning out of the industrial age. And our model of higher education is really a model that aligns more with an industrial age model. And we've got to get to that digital age model. And so that's part of what you're hearing us talking about at Pima.
I don't know who came first, Board Member Klinko or Dr. Duran-Cerda. You both have your hands up.
Well, my question is just an actualization question, which is Chancellor Lambert, and then I'm sure our provost will have some insight into all of this. But Chancellor Lambert, could you tell us what is the plan to actually bring forward a pathway to do this around the liberal arts? I mean, we've sort of been, talking about this for a while, and I think we have seen some outstanding examples of sort of the implementation of digital tools into the classroom, impacting because it's really about the skills. It's building the skills embedded into the program, right? So I think about our, the drawing class where then things were actualized into 3D printing,
Right.
Model or the example. So could you tell us really when would we expect to see this type of fully integrated programming in place? Is that a 1-year horizon? Is that a 2-year horizon? Is that a 5-year horizon? Really, because it's not just in the arts, it's in the liberal arts. So I mean, if this is a transformational way of thinking about how we are delivering and how we have traditionally delivered classes. And then I guess my follow-up question is, how does that really dovetail into ensuring that we still have clear pathways to the universities for transfer? So we're not creating programming and things that won't transfer, and that we're back in the same problem that we were in 4 years ago, where credits weren't transferring and we were costing students.
Right. So as you know, we have been looking at different technology platforms, if you will, one of which was the Apple platform. And so we just, a group of us just got off a call earlier today where another community college integrating those digital tools into their classrooms, both on the liberal arts side or the gen ed side, as well as in the CTE side, are seeing great results. So they call it their one-to-one initiative, where every student gets an iPad. The faculty are supported in integrating that iPad into the learning environment. And again, they're seeing great results. Maryville University is another one who's done a similar thing. And Penn State, another college, one of their colleges in the Penn State University system has done this. So we're starting to see colleges who are starting to integrate these digital things into the context of gen ed courses or liberal arts courses, starting to see some better enrollment, better retention, and the like. So we've already been moving down this path. Now it's just the question, when do we say this is the model? And I think, and I can have Dolores talk about this because she's leading that conversation with our goal to fully get to something come the fall. So that's one piece. Now, on David's side of the house, they've been working on the what we call Pima fast tracks, the micro pathways. So the micro pathways are the integration of a 21st century skill, but you typically get in the liberal arts side, along with the technical skills you get on the CTE side, into a short-term programming of 8 weeks, maybe a little longer. And so we've already launched that. So we've launched a handful of those. And so as those take root, we may be able to scale that quicker and quicker to other areas of the college. So you have those two big pieces starting to come together as part of, jumping onto that second curve, if you will. So it's just a question of getting our buy-in internally to just say, we embrace this and let's get moving. It does mean changing of contracts and how we look at contracts for employees and the like. But at the other end, it I think will provide employment opportunities that are going to become harder and harder to maintain if we stay on that first curve or that, more industrial age model. So these are all coming together now. But as we've learned from these other institutions, these are multi-year approaches. And so, but it's that patience, but also recognizing that that is the right path to where we're moving.
Well, Lee, as a follow-up, what could the board do to help support this? I mean, I think we all know this is critical. We've been talking about it for years.
Right.
What can we do to help accelerate this in terms of budgeting, in terms of policy support? What can we bring forward to help articulate that this is a institutional priority?
Right. I think you've already done that. It's now, and like we've learned from the other two institutions we've talked to, you take a buy-in approach. You don't dictate it from above, and that over time it becomes your standard. And recognizing it's just a multi-year approach, but you've been clear. And I think make the board just continuing to be clear. We expect you to get on that second curve, and that you continue to lead down that path. We will support important policy changes that need to be made to align to that. So you'll see us bringing some of that forward as we go along. But I think we're well positioned because we're in a good financial position to do this. But we also have to accept the other realities, right? The U.S. is not growing population-wise. The fertility rates, as you know, are well below replacement levels. So there's a reality coming through the K-12 side. We have a big bulge in terms of the working learner population. And so that means we have to do things differently because they're working. They don't have time to come for, at 8 a.m. to 2 p.m, right? And in some cases, they may not even want to come on campus at all. So, those things. So I think the board's doing that now. It's just us continuing this long march, because that's what it is. It's a long march. It's not going to happen overnight. We're not in a drastic need to just, do it right now either, because we've been working on it.
Thank you, Chancellor. We have about 4 minutes. Provost, would you like to add to that?
Yes, I'll be quick. Thank you, Board Chair Ripley. I wanted to first answer Board Member Garcia's question and then Board Member Klinko's question. So Board Member Garcia, a few months ago, last semester, there was cybersecurity, the Center of Excellence for IT. Cybersecurity had a group of specialists, panelists on cybersecurity and hacking and all of that. And students were part of that. Others were live streaming, but the students who were there present had a chance to talk to them and ask questions. And one of the students raised, it was a male, his hand, and he said, I'm a liberal arts student and I'm really interested in cybersecurity. What can I do? Is it too late for me? And one of the specialists said, no, in fact, communication, psychology comes first and then technology when it comes to cybersecurity. So there is a support for working together regarding the liberal arts and then technology. So that was, I thought, very eye-opening if we collaborate on that. Then because of COVID, faculty were forced to use technology, whether they were used to it or liked it or not, but they really have stepped up and are so innovative. And we had division meetings where they shared everything that they're creating and sharing with each other, working with the TLC. So they're on board. There may be some pockets, but they're bringing along the others who maybe are a little bit unsure. One more thing, the B of A, the work that we're doing in NC11 or II, we're having this curriculum subgroup that came out of the Breaking Student Barriers Task Force, is now working with B of A and their consultants on focusing on the liberal arts, putting in technology, embedding DEI, climate action, 21st century skills. So we are currently, we've been for months now, well, let's say 2 semesters, we've been working on that. So it's coming to fruition, but it does take time. And it's a total different mind shift from how things were in the past. But we're getting there and we're progressing fast. So I just wanted to reassure you that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. B, do you want to conclude? I just wanted to say thank you for this. This is it's pretty much a broad brush, but in a study session, this is precisely why we're here, is it's a lot of food for thought. We, as board members, are going to have to do our own homework and research and reach back out to Dr. B, to the chancellor, to myself, and we need to have this discussion and have a really serious look at the holistic view of retention and enrollment, right sizing. What is this budget going to look like in comparison to the recent class comp study as well? There's a lot of pieces to this giant puzzle, and it's not hard. It's not easy. Sorry, I was going to say it ain't easy. It's extremely difficult. And I appreciate all the comments about liberal arts, because the beauty of a community college is that we're not a VOTEC. We do have liberal arts, and it's extremely important to humanity. So I'll final words, Dr. B, before we go on to the next topic.
Again, really appreciate the conversation today. And then the next conversation we'll be having will be tied more directly to the tuition and what I discussed earlier in terms of the proposal to fold in what was funded by the federal dollars with a fairly moderate $2 tuition increase is what we're looking to bring in March. We'll also be taking benefits, which I've talked with the board a little bit about, that the good news on the benefits side is there is not a big increase, and that the college will fold in the additional moderate cost increase for medical in terms of not pushing the cost to the employees. And then as we go through the spring, we'll have more conversations again about class comp with more detail, more information as the steering committees work through that and come up with recommendations. We'll have a discussion with the board related to that and related to capital. And then the last thing in March, we'll be talking about the student success courses and looking to formalize that those will be ongoing at no tuition going into the future. So that'll be our next conversation, and really appreciate the conversation that we had here today.
Thank you so much for that. I think we need to go on to the next topic. It's 5:01. We're on schedule. Another extremely important topic: diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I can speak, I think, for the board, on behalf of the board. We all take this very seriously, and it's a topic near and dear to our hearts. So I will hand it over to you, Chancellor, to introduce the speakers.
Thank you, Chairwoman Ripley, and it's my pleasure to introduce our diversity, equity, inclusion conversation around the high-level strategic planning that we've been doing, as well as an overview of our climate assessment, and with specific emphasis around the recent Pride Index work and the path forward. I'm just very pleased to have Hilda Ladner here. Under her leadership, all these pieces are coming together, so I want to thank Hilda and her team for that. Also, we have Carlene Thompson here from HR, who's been heading up our affirmative action work. As you know, we can't set quotas, but we can set goals. And so I know we don't have time to go through all of the specifics, but I really wanted Hilda to kind of lead us through this and really get to some of the inclusion pieces, because I think as diversity, equity, and inclusion can also be seen as KPIs. And then if you look at those big KPIs, there's certain pieces that we need to get better at. And that sense of inclusion, especially with our LGBTQ plus employees and students, we have to do better. And so with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Hilda.
Thank you so much, Chancellor. Thank you, Chair Ripley and board members, for inviting me to provide this update for you. Let me share my screen. I don't think this is sharing the right thing with you. Just one moment. Are you seeing diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yes.
Okay. I'm on two screens and it's looking a little bit different for me, but anyway, so thank you so much for the invitation to join you today. I'll just give you a really brief overview of some of the work, as Chancellor Lambert said, on where we are with the planning process, and then some of the recent work we've been doing around climate assessment. So looking at belonging. There's a lot here. I'm going to go through it rather quickly, so please let me know if you have questions and we can discuss. So as you know, one of the Chancellor goals for this year is to develop a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic plan, and I'm leading that effort. There's a group of about 25 of us that have been working on this new strategic plan for the college. Last fall, we reviewed a lot of data from the college related to employee demographics, retention, completion, student information, and also recent climate surveys that were completed through Hanover Research and the Campus Pride Index. During the spring, we've already started drafting what some of the priorities will be, and we'll be seeking input from different constituents internally and externally around what those priorities should be. We'll finalize that in alignment with the college's strategic plan and then bring it back to you all for feedback and approval. So as the Chancellor already said, you know, the three areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion, when we look at diversity, it's really about representation, the composition of the college, who is here. And as a community college, we are really very diverse. We are aligned with the demographics of Tucson as far as the student representation of the college, as well as our employee demographics. And we compare really similarly to other similar institutions as it relates to our employee demographics. Equity is really then about access and what our system looks like, so that students and learners can access the institution, not just coming through the door as an open access institution, but through our different programs and through their goals for their lives. There's been a lot of work happening in this area over the last year, including our Equity and Student Retention Working Group, which went through the Gardner Academy on student retention and equity over this next year. We're really looking at the experiences of part-time students and then breaking it down from there for different demographic groups so that we know what the experience of students are and how we can be more friendly to students, especially as we see that 70% of our students attend part-time. We need to be thinking about the part-time student. Pathways work is also related to system and access, the fast track certificate programs that the Chancellor mentioned in adult education, our IBEST programs, and dual enrollment, so that you can see that across the lifespan of students here at the college, we're thinking about equity. So then the final piece then is inclusion, and this is really about belonging and thinking about everyone's experience at the college, both around sense of belonging, safety, being seen and represented at the college. So we've done some climate assessment work. We've reviewed some of our resources and policies and practices and disaggregated data in a lot of different ways so that we know what different experiences are, and I'll be sharing that with you as part of this today. So first, we were provided with some information from our human resources colleagues around the affirmative action plan, and that is included in your board documents with more extensive information that is provided here on this slide. But what I will pull out from here is both that we have an affirmative action plan and are looking at it in different ways than we maybe have in the past, and that, again, goals and percentages around goals are not quotas, that we want to make sure that we are recruiting really diverse pools so that we have options and can improve the diversity in our different job categories, but again, not quotas. And then the other piece is that we do have the equal opportunity, employment opportunity clause as part of all of our contracts for purchasing and other things. So I'll just leave it there. We can talk more about that if you have questions. And this is, again, you've seen this before, just some demographics about our faculty. This is probably where we're not quite as diverse as the demographics of Tucson, and somewhere where we need to work, but again, doing well as compared to others. This chart shows you just the different race and ethnicities and male-female demographics for the college. When we look over at our full-time staff, you can see that that is a lot more aligned with our student demographics and the demographics of Tucson. It's we employ more women than men, And we also are well aligned with the percentage of Hispanic Latinx employees, similar to our students. And again, all of the demographics are a lot more aligned. So now I'll turn over to our work around assessing the climate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'll start with some work that we did over the last year. A team of about 15 of us worked over the last year to review more data for the college, looking at representation, retention, completion. We studied best practices from across the nation, including participating in some different virtual conferences and webinars and events to help the team understand what DI climate is, what some good models are across the nation, and what we should be striving for. We also worked with Hanover Research to conduct a climate survey and an employee focus group. And then separately, a group of us completed the Campus Pride Index. So first, the Hanover Research did a climate survey. This was conducted last May. We sent out a large number of emails, as you can see, to faculty, staff, and students, everyone that had a pima.edu email. Now that you see that around 34,000 emails to students went out. Not all of those were necessarily taking classes with us at that point in time. So the return rate is hard to really know what exactly that was. So we received 1,100 responses to the survey. Faculty, staff, and students responded, and Hanover Research provided us with a portal where we can look at all of our different results, and also with a report regarding their highlights of what they thought about our climate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So some of the key findings from that include that most people do agree or strongly agree that Pima leaders consider diversity, equity, and inclusion to be important. For staff and administrators, that was 67%. Students and faculty were at 77%. And also that more than 3/4 of respondents somewhat or strongly agreed that it is a priority to narrow success gaps. So good findings. They also looked at sense of belonging. You can see on this graph that we looked at feeling valued, respected in the sense of community. The blue is students, the orange is faculty, and the gray is staff. You can see that students had a greater sense of feeling valued and respected at the college, and all of those numbers are pretty high. Another interesting finding is that 60% of respondents said that they'd never participated in a diversity, equity, and inclusion event at the college. And when we looked at specifically for students, that number went up to 80%. So something for us to really think about and consider. Some of the key findings around faculty and staff, again, most of these were rather high, but I wanted to pull some that maybe weren't as high on the different rankings. So the first one here is feeling confident that reporting harassment and discrimination would not have a negative professional impact. For faculty, only 52% agreed or strongly agreed, and for staff, that was at 60%. Feeling comfortable reporting incidents of harassment and discrimination was a little bit higher, as well as how supportive is Pima of fostering a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The bottom one there, where gives you a little bit of pause about this, is that Pima promotes equity in promotion decisions. Both faculty and staff were closer to the 50%. We did ask for disaggregated information, and we weren't able to do this for all of the different race and ethnicity groups. Hanover wasn't able to provide that, but they did pull out the experiences for Hispanic and Latinx respondents and for Black and African American respondents. The numbers for the Hispanic and Latinx respondents was really similar to the overall experience, so I didn't pull that out, but I did want to share with you what it looked like for our Black and African American members of our community. So you can see in these different areas, the blue are Black and African American respondents, and the orange are those that do not identify as Black or African American. And there's a difference in perceptions around that diverse faculty and staff are engaged and involved at the college, 78% to 64%. Diversity and inclusion are prominent in coursework. There's a number difference there. Diverse students are engaged and involved, and that Pima fosters a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So you can see those slight drops there. The other piece where I thought it would be important to pull out information is around the experiences of our LGBTQIA2S+ community. And for those that may be watching and wondering what the different letters are, that's lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, intersex, asexual or aromantic, and two-spirit. And those are just some of the letters around LGBTQ identity. So the chart on your left looks at sense of safety. And we pulled out the gray is respondents that identify as non-binary or gender non-conforming. Orange is not straight or heterosexual. And blue is straight and heterosexual. And you can see that these numbers are still high, but when compared to respondents that identify as straight or heterosexual, there's a significant difference going from, over 90% feeling safe during class, going to and from campus and safe at campus events. The number goes down when you look at especially non-binary and gender non-conforming respondents. The other graph is around feeling isolated or alienated, and then feeling like you need to hide some aspect of your identity in order to fit in at Pima. And the lower number there are those that identify as straight or heterosexual, and the number that it's showing us is respondents that in the last year, daily or weekly, felt like they felt isolation or alienation or had to hide some aspect of their identity. And you can see how much the numbers go up when you look at respondents that identify as non-binary or gender non-conforming. Goes, from 7% to 36% and 43%. So based on some of that data and information from the survey, the climate assessment team provided some recommendations related to what we should consider for the strategic plan. I'll pause here for a second, and Ms. Garcia, you had a question? Your microphone is off.
Yeah, I'm just wondering why, considering that the population at Pima College, the higher percentage is white and then the second is Hispanic, why you didn't include any of those two? Instead you chose to do, go ahead.
Sure. The reason that I didn't pull that out is because that number was really similar. The percentages were really close together or almost the same, but I can come back and show you some of that information at a later time or share that with you also.
Yeah, well, I think, I've already gotten calls about this data. And one of the things that, that's one of the comments that they made, considering that the Tucson is, a high percentage of Hispanics, and the chart doesn't show anything about them. Like they kind of, what the comments that I've gotten is that we're not here. We're not at the table. We don't matter. And I'm just sharing what I've been told.
Okay, thank you for that. I didn't pull out those numbers because they weren't significantly different or different at all, but I can definitely share that back out with you. Okay, so these are the recommendations that we will consider as maybe including in the diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. And each of these themes had a number of actions below it. So those will be things we consider. The next piece that we did with Hanover Research was employee focus groups. And we decided to do that because of the timing during the year and because of some of the pieces that came out from the staff and faculty perceptions. So we worked with Hanover. They sent out over almost 2,000 emails to employees and groups below the director level and for faculty. And employees then self-selected to be part of these focus groups. So they conducted 3 focus groups, which was the plan all along. So they were only going to do 3 focus groups. One group with female staff, one group with male staff, and one with faculty. These were small group discussions, and they were conducted in November with the report coming to us in January. Some of the findings from those focus groups focused on these themes. So employees felt that recent changes in hiring practices, such as greater inclusion and blinded resumes, are evidence that Pima is changing and taking diversity, equity, and inclusion more seriously. The employees also felt that divided leadership throughout PCC causes difficult work environments for employees, and that employees feel unheard and made to work in an environment of fear due to their lack of knowledge about reporting structures. Participants also want diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives to be transparent, reflecting the voices of stakeholders across the college community, and with administration held accountable for implementation of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Staff and faculty would like a shared governance model that works for everyone at the college, and participants also find a considerable pay equity problem at PCC, particularly with adjunct faculty not being adequately compensated for their work. So those were the 6 themes, and their recommendations from Hanover based on the focus group conversations were that we need to create a campus-wide inclusive DEI task force that is funded and can enact change, that we need to reestablish or examine our shared governance across the institution, and that we need to provide documented examples of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives to increase transparency across the institution, particularly around compensation practices. So these are some conversations that are happening now, and that will be examined as part of our strategic planning process, including that we have conversations happening around shared governance with various groups. And I'll just say that this isn't necessarily part of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but certainly part of climate and important for us to address. Ms. Garcia?
Hilda, thank you for putting this out here. That's kind of what Hanover has made recommendations on, and what they've addressed are similar things that I've been listening, that I've been hearing, that people have been calling me about. So hopefully we can do something about making these changes for improvement. You know, I'm hopeful, not guaranteeing it, but I'm hopeful.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, this is something that we are considering in our discussions, right, as part of the planning process on our next strategic plan. Chair Ripley?
Yes, thank you so much. I know you're not finished, but I also wanted to just interject that, especially with this slide here and the 3 recommendations, they're so doable, and these are things that we are working on behind the scenes, and with your help and with the help of the DEI office, and really this is an all hands thing. I mean, this is something that we all need to take responsibility for and lead the way. So I think that this is wonderful. I love it. I love that we did a survey, and I also love that there was a Pride Index conducted. And I don't think we fared that well, but this is why we're doing this, is to look at it, look at the hard facts, and because we don't know what we don't know. And so this is why we're here. And now that we know, this is a start. And a lot of these things are really doable. What is more challenging, and I think we have board support on this, is changing culture and changing mindsets, especially when it involves the LGBTQ plus community and there's a T in LGBTQ plus. And I think these are things that we're all learning and we're all going to grow and be better for. So thank you so much.
Thank you. So with that, you've just teed up our talking about the Campus Pride Index. I'll try to move through some of this more quickly. I know we have limited time. So the Campus Pride Index is a national tool that colleges can use to assess policies, practices, and programs and how they impact the quality of life for LGBTQ and ally campus community. This was something that was recommended at our LGBTQ plus town hall last year. And so I worked on it with a few other individuals at the college. Currently, there are about 450 colleges that are listed on the Campus Pride Index. Only 48 of them are community colleges. Colleges are scored on a scale of 1 to 5, just for context. Of the community colleges listed, only 5 of them had 4 or more stars, and 20 of them had 3 or more stars. And there are 6 Hispanic serving institutions that are listed on the Campus Pride Index. So for Pima, we did receive 2 stars out of 5 when we completed the survey. So for the sexual orientation score, it was 2 out of 5 stars, and our gender identity and expression score was also 2 stars. There are 8 sections of the Campus Pride Index, so they ask us a number of questions about services, resources, the way that we do our work, classes, all kinds of things. And so we did best in that policy inclusion, where we received 3.5 stars. We scored our lowest in support and institutional commitment, and that has to do somewhat with staffing. I work on a lot of these issues, but it's certainly not 100% of my time. And so when you don't have dedicated staff to really pay attention full time to these issues, that takes its toll and can create less awareness about the work that needs to happen. Under academic life, we received 2.5 stars. Student life, we received 2. Campus safety, we were at 2.5 stars. Counseling and health, 2 stars. And then recruitment and retention, we received 1.5 stars. The 8th category is residential life, and we were not scored there because we're not a residential college. So some of the takeaways are that, we scored similarly to other community colleges. We're not far off, but certainly there is work to do, as you could see from our score. It does provide a good baseline for our work going forward. And as Chair Ripley said, you can't work on what you don't identify. And so doing this really helps us know exactly what the issues are and start to address them. So you name it and then you work on it, right? And start to address issues. Some issues to address based on our scores are around staffing. We need to do some additional examination of our policies and processes. In student life, counseling, and recruitment, we need to become more comfortable with the vocabulary, with actually thinking about the LGBTQ plus community, and specific, like with other groups around identity groups, we need to make sure that we're comfortable with equity and not just treating everybody the same, that we need to think about equity issues, what it means to really address issues for different communities. And then in academic affairs, making sure that we're providing more training for our faculty and looking at our curriculum to be more inclusive. Yes, Ms. Garcia?
Yeah, I just have a question on this, the assessment that you did for the LGBTQ. Okay. Did you do the similar things for the other populations?
So that was part of our climate survey, and we do have some pieces there that we've drawn out. We've looked at, that climate survey and what other colleges are doing. And so those are places where the Breaking Student Barriers Task Force has really looked at the experiences for different groups. And it's a lot of the work that we're doing in the equity and student retention is also really focused around both the part-time student and looking at the experiences for different racial and ethnic groups.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So this is just some of the immediate next steps that we're looking to take. I've already met with our organizational effectiveness and development and our teaching and learning center to talk about drafting some different programs that we can immediately offer. Tina Neal in OED has outlined what a manager track could look like for professional development around addressing climate and environment for members of the LGBTQ community. We would also have it on employee track, and out of the Teaching and Learning Center this spring, the focus of their Equity and Inclusivity Summit will include LGBTQ plus topics and presentations, especially as they relate to non-binary and gender non-conforming experiences. Our Human Resources Office has already started to examine our employment application process to be more inclusive, to include capturing chosen name and pronouns early in our employment application process. we'll organize another town hall to provide information, more detail about the Pride Index and the work that needs to happen, and solicit additional feedback from the community. And then we will develop an action plan to address some of the climate issues that were raised in the Campus Pride Index. And of course, some of our progress will be measured by taking that survey again and seeing how we can improve over time. And then finally, this is one of the areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and certainly there's a lot more across the college. So looking at the Campus Pride Index and some of the steps there, we've already started to address restroom access and chosen name on ID badges. We need to do more professional development, and that was one of the recommendations of the climate assessment group, is that we need inclusion and DEI topics at a variety of different levels so that all employees have an entry point to this conversation, but also more advanced trainings for people that are further along, that want to do more, that want to make sure their classrooms are more inclusive for all of the varying learners that we serve. Some of the long-term planning is really what's going into our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic plan. So what were the recommendations out of the Breaking Student Barriers Task Force? What are the other things that we're seeing out of the climate assessment for Black and African American students and community members, as well as maybe there are specific pieces around, how do we make sure that we're Hispanic serving institutions, right? If we're a Hispanic serving institution, what does it look like to be serving? What does that mean for language and outreach and specific outreach to communities? So all of these different pieces are definitely part of our conversation. So I'll pause there, see what other questions you have. I know that was a lot of information.
Any questions from our board members or audience members? Thank you so much. That was a lot. I know you're taking a breath now. We have one question from board member Klinko.
Thank you very much, Hilda. We really appreciate all of the work that you're doing in this. We know that you're such a small shop, and it's a huge amount of work to really tackle. So thank you so much for your work in this area. I really wanted to just sort of focus in my questions on the Pride indexing. This is something, I'm certainly, something I've been talking about, as Chancellor Lambert knows, for quite a while. And so I'm really glad to see this progress. I wanted to know what, sort of, as you always know, I love to know timelines. So what do you see timelines being in terms of implementation of a number of the changes? And if we were to, let's say in a year, do the survey again, where would we land? How far do you think we can get in terms of institutional transformation in this area to get to that 5-star rating?
So as I said, a few things are already in progress and easy to do and change. So our employee information process, that's already started. And so capturing and directing the information in the correct ways, for chosen name and pronouns, I think that is going to move quickly. We've already started to address restroom access issues, and a group led out of our registrar's office has been working for the last several months around the process and inclusion for students, so that students can have their chosen name and pronouns on rosters, on their Pima, and so across our system, making sure that we're capturing the correct name. At this point, we're really just making sure that we've caught everything and that all of our systems are communicating correctly with each other, so that students aren't misgendered and misnamed, dead named in different places. Part of the challenge is, as you said, I'm a small office, pretty much one person doing a lot of this work, and then my other staff member really working on immigration and refugee issues for the college, which is also a really big job. And so when I work as sort of in a consultant fashion, project to project, and right now the biggest project is the strategic plan, it's hard to work on all of it. But certainly I think that in a year, we'll have made quite a significant amount of progress on policy issues and addressing classroom climate. Our faculty are really excited to be part of this. And I've already received several emails identifying speakers for our spring forum or summit that's coming out of our TLC, as well as faculty that are eager to present on some of these topics during that. So where will we be? I don't think we'll be at 5 in a year. It takes time to build, but I think we can get up there to a 3.5 and make some progress on a lot of these issues.
And I guess, I mean, I think as a follow-up question, if I can, I certainly know the board has articulated the importance of this topic, not just the Pride indexing, but our equity, inclusion, and diversity initiative as a top priority for the institution. So maybe as we talk about, I would be curious to know, Chancellor Lambert, if there are other resources that could be brought to bear to support some of this and the implementation of this in a more rapid sort of deployed way to support this office and doing some of these things. A good example is the Pride indexing. Are there tools that we can bring to bear and resources to really affect change in to move with alacrity?
So so the short answer is yes. So what I like to do is look at reallocating some existing positions. As you know, as things are shifting in the larger sphere of the college, maybe there's some places we can move existing employees who have the competencies into some of these areas to help better support our overall DEI work. So I would love to see an individual, for example, who would work with Hilda specifically around LGBTQ plus issues and supporting our training efforts and creating a better sense of belonging. So that would be one example. Another example is looking at creating a better reporting structure for concerns and looking to see, we may already have an individual or individuals at the college who we could identify as an ombudsperson to be that neutral person at the college where you can bring your concerns forward and then have them addressed in a more informal way. We have a formal process, and that's through our ODR office. What we don't have is this informal piece. So I think those are at least two pieces we can move on before we move into the fall, as long as the board is supportive of that. And I believe overall the board is supportive of that approach, and it's just reallocating without having to add to our existing financial realities that we face. And then you're going to see the training that's going to get rolled out pretty soon here. And I really want us to emphasize the pronoun piece. And I know Hilda knows that. And really, I think we can start to make inroads there. And then you're going to see us doing more town halls to keep the community up to date. But it's not just about LGBTQ plus issues. It's about the whole range of DEI. We know we have to do a better job around the inclusion part. As you're seeing, we're doing pretty well on the diversity piece in terms of representation, et cetera. We're doing a better job around equity. You saw Dolores share last month around where we are in terms of outcomes for students based on race and ethnicity. We're getting to that equity line there. So now where I think our biggest gap, and I'm not saying we're not going to continue to work in those other areas, is in the inclusion, the sense of belonging. We've got to get better at that. And so this is really going to help us to be able to really strengthen those areas.
Yeah, Damien, you had a comment or question? No, okay. Sorry, Provost.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to share that more and more now on the campuses, we're seeing more gender fluidity.
Yes.
And we are a community college that is, we want our students, we want to be ready for our students, is what I want to say. In the past, it's been said, we want students to be college ready. Pima Community College needs to be ready for the students. Whatever background, whatever identity, who they are, we bring them in as inclusive as possible and make them feel comfortable. There's a sense of belonging so they can reach their goals. So I just wanted to share that. We need to be ready for them.
And let me build off of what Dolores is pointing out. If you look at the generation that's coming up, the Gen Z, this is their expectation of all organizations, that we become more conversant and be able to understand the different dynamics around non-binary, gender nonconformity, looking at non-straight or heterosexual dynamics, et cetera, et cetera. So we got to get better at that. And we are going to get better at that. And it is a continuous improvement growth process, and because that is the expectation of that generation as they move through. Not that it's not true of other generations, but I think what we're starting to see is more of that reality. It's not going to lessen, it's going to grow in its intensity, and we have to be prepared to create that welcoming environment.
Thank you. And I'd like to add too that the fact that we do these surveys and we do the indexes and we have strategies being written is wonderful in and of itself. But the next and most important step is the implementation and the how. The how piece is going to be where we turn to all of you to help us implement. And what we do best is education. So that's a big start, is communicating all of what we've learned down and make sure that it trickles down to the entire staff, faculty, and administration. And it has to come from leadership on down. And I heard a term today, not about us, without us. So we do need to hear from the communities, whether they're people of color, the LGBTQ plus community, women. We need to create an environment where people aren't afraid to come forth and speak, and where people can help us to take the next step, because many of us aren't necessarily equipped to do that. So this is truly a team effort. It's a community effort. It's a family effort, the family of the community college. So thank you so much. And Hilda, you have a team of one, but please, please, please don't ever hesitate to ask us what you need. What more do you need? The worst thing we can say is no, but the best case scenario is, oh, we didn't know. Thank you for asking. Here you go. So take that leap. Any other comments? This is a huge, important topic. And I think that no matter what community you come from, LGBTQ plus community, the female community, whatever minority, people of color, I think that it's important that we stress the beauty of community college in and of itself being diverse. I mean, we're diverse, whether we like it or not. So rather than just tolerate it and just create a safe place, I would like to see this college embrace and celebrate our diversity. Thank you so much. Any other comments or questions?
Right.
Yes.
Hold on. Okay. So I guess what I wanted to say is that it needs to start with the board. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, and that's why we're here. And I'm really excited about. I'm not excited about the Pride Index or the survey, but it is what it is, and we needed to hear that. We needed to hear the hard facts. So, and again, we didn't know what we didn't know, and now we do. So there's no excuse. So let's go for it. And I, for one, as chair of the board, commit to really dedicating our time to the how piece. We've done these surveys. How do we fix it? Thank you. Anyone else? I think we've finished a little bit early.
So I'll just, if I can add really quickly, I just want to thank you for that. It's important that when we do these Pride Index or the campus climate, it's really important that we're ready to act on our findings, that we can't just, do this, identify issues, and then do nothing with it, because that's really disappointing to the community and doesn't help with our climate. So I know that, your commitment and with your support, we can move forward on a lot of these issues that we have identified, and it's work that can be done.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes. And that's the how. So we know the what, the next step is the how. I'm all about the 5 W's and the H. The H is the how. So thank you so much. Anything else, anybody? Chancellor? Board members? Thank you so much, Dr. B. Hilda, thank you so much for being here and educating us. We have a lot of work to do, and I think that people are excited to roll their sleeves up and to actually do the work. It's going to be challenging. The budget is going to be challenging. We have amazing times ahead, but I think that this is something that we all can get on the same page and really try to look at what is the greater good of the college. That's the key thing, is to always keep in mind. Thank you so much, everybody. I think this concludes our study session.
Bye.
Bye-bye.